There was a tree so terrifying, an entire region bowed to it. For generations, the massive oak at Geismar was revered as the very throne of the thunder god. The air around it felt heavy, suffocating. Touching its rough bark meant certain death by lightning, until a single, unarmed monk walked into the dense forest. He didn't bring an army to fight the Hessian people. He didn't carry a sword. He only brought a woodcutter's axe and a quiet prayer that would change the course of history forever. His story didn't start with a mighty axe. It started in the quiet hills of Devon, England, where a boy named Winfrith grew up in the comfort of a safe, predictable religion. But listening to the tales of traveling monks, a seed of conviction was planted. He didn't want a convenient faith. He wanted to carry the light where darkness had reigned for centuries. By his early 40s, Winfrith had become a brilliant scholar at the Abbey of Nursling. When the abbot passed away, the brothers unanimously elected Winfrith to take his place. It was the ultimate offer of prestige and security, yet he refused. He gave up a guaranteed life of peace to sail for the harsh pagan territory of Frisia. He was ready to change the world. But his very first missionary journey was a complete, humiliating failure. A local ruler, King Radbot, had plunged the region into war. Preaching was impossible. Winfrith was forced to pack his bags and return to England, having accomplished absolutely nothing. It was a crushing blow. Have you ever stepped out in faith, taking a huge risk for God only to fall flat on your face? It is utterly devastating. The easiest thing is to conclude you misheard God's voice and settle back into your comfort zone. But Winfrith understood a profound truth: a closed door is not a canceled calling. It is simply a divine redirection. And that is exactly how Winfrith saw it. Instead of giving up, the middle-aged monk made a radical decision. In 718, he walked across the treacherous snow-capped Alps all the way to Rome. Kneeling before Pope Gregory II, he sought an official commission to evangelize the untamed Germanic tribes. The Pope saw a fire that failure could not extinguish. He stripped away the name Winfrith and renamed him Boniface, meaning he who does good. Clutching a sealed parchment of papal authorization, Boniface turned his face northward. He was heading straight into the deeply feared forests of Hesse, a place where ancient gods still ruled the shadows and where the true test of his faith was waiting. In the year 723, Boniface arrived in the very heart of Hesse. What he found there was not just a dense, uncharted wilderness of trees. It was a wilderness of profound, paralyzing fear. The spiritual center of this entire region and the source of its terror was located in a place called Geismar. It was a massive ancient oak tree dedicated to Donar, the fierce Germanic god of thunder who was also known to the Norse as Thor. This tree wasn't just a religious symbol or a local landmark. It was an undisputed empire of terror. Its sprawling, twisted branches were so incredibly thick that they literally blocked out the sun, casting a permanent chilling shadow over the forest floor. The ground beneath it had been the site of countless ancient sacrifices. The psychological grip of this idol was so absolute, so deeply ingrained in the culture that even many of the newly baptized Christians were completely terrified of it. Under the cover of darkness, they would secretly creep back to the oak to offer meat and grain. They were buying spiritual insurance just in case the thunder god was real and decided to strike them down in his wrath. They were living a tormented double life, with one foot in the light of the church and the other foot trapped in the dark, suffocating grip of pagan dread. Boniface saw this immediately. He realized that preaching eloquent words would never be enough to break this ancient demonic level of fear. He remembered the uncompromising urgent command from 1 John chapter 5, verse 21, "Little children, keep yourselves from idols." He knew that as long as that terrifying tree stood, it would always cast a dark shadow over their hearts and minds. He couldn't just stand at a safe distance and preach against the darkness. He had to walk right up to it and tear down the throne itself. So Boniface did the unthinkable. In a move of staggering boldness, he stood in the bustling village square and publicly announced exactly the day and the hour that he was going to chop down Donar's oak. The news spread through the surrounding valleys and settlements like wildfire. When the appointed day finally arrived, a massive, intimidating crowd of Hessian warriors gathered in the clearing of the sacred forest. They didn't come to hear a sermon about grace. They came to watch a bloody execution. They stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces painted with grim anticipation. Hands resting on the hilts of their swords, The air was incredibly thick, heavy with the sharp smell of sweat, damp earth, and sheer tension. They fully expected the sky to rip open. They were waiting for a blinding bolt of lightning to instantly incinerate this foolish, arrogant foreigner for daring to insult the mighty god of thunder. Picture the sheer absurd contrast of that historical moment. A massive crowd of armed, battle-hardened pagans holding their breath in the dim light of the forest, waiting for divine wrath to fall. And standing alone in the center of the clearing was a single man in his late 40s, wearing nothing but a simple, coarse monk's robe. He had no armor, he carried no shield. There were no soldiers standing by to protect him if the mob decided to attack. There was just a solitary man gripping the wooden handle of a heavy woodcutter's axe, armed only with an unwavering, absolute faith in the living God. Boniface stepped right up to the massive rough bark of the sacred tree. He planted his feet on the damp soil, raised the heavy iron axe high over his shoulder, and locked his eyes on the trunk. The entire crowd held its breath in dead, agonizing silence. Then he swung. The sound of iron biting deep into the ancient, unyielding wood echoed through the silent forest like a cannon shot. The Hessian warriors instinctively flinched, bracing themselves for the deafening roar of thunder. They stared up at the sky, waiting for the lightning to strike, waiting for the furious god Donner to defend his honor and strike this disrespectful monk dead on the spot. But the sky remained perfectly clear. Not a single cloud moved. The only sound in the entire forest was the steady, rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of the monk's axe cutting deeper and deeper into the sacred wood. The chips of bark flew into the air, landing softly on the ground. Watching that ancient idol splinter, we have to ask ourselves, are there sacred oaks in your life today? Cultural idols, financial worries, or deep-seated fears that dictate what you do, quietly telling you that if you dare to cross them, your life will be completely ruined. We so often live in terror of things that have absolutely no real power over us. We fear the harsh opinions of others, the sudden loss of our social status, or the unpredictable shifts of the economy, treating them like vengeful gods that can strike us down at any given moment. But Boniface showed us what actually happens when you finally stop bowing to the illusion and stand your ground in faith. And that is exactly what the Hessians witnessed. With every powerful swing of the axe, the deep-rooted terror in the hearts of the Hessians began to unravel. They watched in absolute wide-eyed disbelief as the monk exhausted himself, hacking away at the thick trunk sweat pouring down his face and soaking his rough robe. Where was the thunder? Where was the divine wrath that had kept their ancestors paralyzed for centuries? Donner, the fearsome almighty god of the skies, was being publicly humiliated by a tired middle-aged monk with a simple piece of sharpened iron. The thunder god was completely, utterly silent. The terrifying idol that had demanded their worship and their sacrifices was exposed as nothing but ordinary dead wood. In that profound, breathtaking silence, the heavy spiritual chains of fear that had bound the Hessian people for countless generations simply dissolved. They realized a truth in that clearing that would go on to reshape the religious landscape of the entire European continent. True power does not need thunder. The god of Boniface didn't need to hurl lightning bolts or strike people dead to prove his absolute sovereignty. His supreme power was perfectly revealed in the quiet, unshakable courage of one man who knew the truth and who refused to be afraid of a lie. Suddenly, a loud, terrifying groan echoed from deep within the heart of the trunk. The ancient, unyielding wood began to violently crack and splinter under the monk's relentless assault. The massive oak of Donner, the very throne of the thunder god, started to lean. With a deafening, thunderous roar that physically shook the very ground the warrior stood on, the giant tree gave way. Its sprawling, twisted branches tore through the rest of the forest canopy, snapping smaller trees like twigs and sending a massive storm of leaves and debris flying into the air. The colossal trunk crashed to the earth with a violent impact, kicking up a massive, suffocating cloud of damp dirt, torn roots, and centuries-old dust. And as the dust began to settle, something visually and spiritually extraordinary happened. For the first time in generations, the thick, oppressive canopy of leaves that had blocked out the sky was completely gone. A wide, unobstructed shaft of warm, brilliant sunlight poured directly down from the heavens into the dark clearing. It brightly illuminated the exact spot where the terrifying idol had ruled in darkness for so long. The shadows were literally and figuratively chased away. The undisputed empire of terror was finally broken. The Hessian warriors stood in the sunlit clearing in absolute breathless awe. The fear that had gripped their throats just moments before was entirely gone, replaced by a profound, reverent wonder. Many of the battle-hardened men dropped their weapons into the dirt. Logically, everyone expected Boniface to strike a flint and burn the fallen wood to ashes. It would have been the ultimate show of disrespect, destroying the cursed idol once and for all, to make a final, undeniable point. But Boniface had a completely different, far more redemptive vision. He didn't just want to leave behind an empty, scorched clearing as a monument to destruction. Instead, he gave a shocking command. He ordered the men to pick up their own axes, approach the fallen oak, and start cutting the massive trunk in sturdy wooden planks. Right there, on the exact same soil that had once been the site of dark, fearful worship. Boniface used the freshly cut wood of Donar's oak to build a beautiful Christian chapel dedicated to St. Peter. This was not just a practical construction project. It was a profound, deeply theological declaration of spiritual authority. Our God doesn't just tear down the dark idols in our lives merely to leave us empty and broken. He takes the very things that once terrified us, the very materials of our greatest fears, our deepest shames, and our past mistakes, and he radically repurposes them to build his sanctuary. He doesn't just defeat the enemy. He builds his victorious church directly on the ruins of the enemy's strongest fortresses. The immediate impact of this single, fearless act of faith was beyond anything Boniface could have possibly imagined when he first walked into that forest. Standing in the warm sunlight, entirely surrounded by the shattered remains of their former god, the Hessian people did not react with anger, violence, or a desire for retaliation. Instead, they reacted with overwhelming, undeniable conviction. They realized in an instant that the god of this foreign monk was real, living, and vastly superior to the dead, silent wood they had been worshiping in fear. Right there in the clearing, by the hundreds and eventually the thousands, the hardened pagan warriors, the fearful villagers, and the local leaders stepped forward, asking to be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ. They had indeed witnessed a breathtaking miracle that day, but it wasn't a terrifying miracle of fire falling from the sky to destroy sinners. It was the quiet, profound miracle of thousands of hardened, fearful hearts being instantly transformed and liberated by the truth of the gospel. It was the ultimate, irrefutable proof of the reality they had just discovered. True power does not need thunder. When you look at your own life today, maybe you are staring at the shattered, broken remains of a sacred oak. Perhaps it is a career that suddenly collapsed, a cherished relationship that unexpectedly broke apart, or a false sense of financial security that was abruptly chopped down by circumstances entirely out of your control. It is terrifying and deeply disorienting to stand in the rubble of what used to make you feel safe. But in those moments of loss, remember what Boniface did with the broken wood. When God lovingly allows the false idols and the false securities in your life to fall, He never abandons you in the wreckage. He is already at work, carefully gathering those broken pieces, your pain, your failure, and the hard lessons you've learned. He is taking the very things that broke your heart, and He is using them to build something far more beautiful, resilient, and enduring in your life. He is building a holy sanctuary where His true, unshakable presence can dwell forever. Decades passed. Boniface spent the rest of his long life tirelessly building the Christian church across the vast expanse of Europe. He traveled relentlessly, established thriving monasteries, reformed corrupt dioceses, and personally trained an entire new generation of spiritual leaders. By the time he reached his late 70s, the young boy from Devon had become an archbishop and arguably the most influential Christian leader on the European continent outside of Rome itself. He had more than earned the absolute, unquestionable right to retire in deep comfort, perfect safety, and immense public honor. But a comfortable, quiet retirement was never what Winfrith of Devon had wanted. Deep within the heart of this aging bishop, a single heavy, unfinished burden still burned brightly. He simply couldn't forget his very first humiliating missionary failure from over 40 years ago. He couldn't forget the fierce, violently pagan shores of Frisia. And so, in the spring of 754, at over 80 years of age, an old man with a long, flowing white beard packed his few belongings and boarded a small wooden ship. He willingly stepped away from the absolute safety of his prestigious archbishopric, setting his jaw and sailing straight back into the harsh, freezing winds of the exact territory that had once completely rejected him. He was going back to finish what he started. For a time, this final mission was incredibly miraculously successful. Over the course of several months, thousands of Frisians heard the gospel and were baptized into the faith. On the early misty morning of June 5th, 754, Boniface and his small, devoted group of followers set up their tents along the marshy banks of a river at a place called Docum. They were peacefully waiting for a large group of newly baptized converts to arrive from the surrounding villages for the sacrament of confirmation. As the sun began to rise, burning off the morning fog, they suddenly heard the heavy, rapid sound of approaching footsteps in the distance. But as the figures emerged from the tree line, it instantly became clear that this wasn't the joyful, celebratory arrival of new believers. Without warning, a violent, heavily armed band of pagan raiders burst into the peaceful camp. They were looking for gold, silver, and easy plunder. Their heavy iron swords were drawn, and their eyes blazed with intense hostility. Absolute chaos erupted in an instant. The quiet morning air was violently shattered by terrifying, blood-curdling shouts and the sharp ringing clash of steel. Boniface's loyal, courageous attendants immediately drew their own weapons, fully prepared to fight to the absolute death to protect their beloved elderly archbishop. But then a frail but remarkably steady 80-year-old voice cut clearly through the violent noise and the panic. Boniface stepped slowly out of his tent into the morning light. He didn't pick up a heavy woodcutter's axe this time. He looked directly at his fiercely loyal men and issued his final shocking command: cease fighting. Lay down your weapons at once. The scriptures strictly teach us not to return evil for evil, but to overcome evil with good. The day of my deliverance, the day I have long waited for, has finally come. He absolutely refused to let his final defining act on earth be one of bloodshed and violence. As the pagan raiders aggressively closed in to deliver the fatal blow, the courageous man who had once boldly destroyed the terrifying sacred idol of Thor did not make a single attempt to physically defend himself. Instead, he reached out his weathered hands and picked up a heavy, leather-bound book of the Gospels. He held the eternal Word of God high above his head to receive the crushing impact of the blade. To this very day, safely preserved in the library of Fulda in Germany, you can still view the actual physically slashed and blood-stained copy of the Gospel book that Boniface held up to protect himself in his final glorious moments. The raiders desperately tore the camp apart, but they found no heavy chests of gold or silver. They only found simple wooden chests filled with theological books and sacred texts. They murdered a defenseless old man, proudly thinking they had won a great victory. But what they actually did was permanently secure his eternal, untouchable legacy by willingly laying down his life in perfect, nonviolent surrender. Boniface sealed the total evangelization of Germany with the ultimate unforgettable sacrifice. The fearless man who famously defeated the mighty god of thunder didn't die wielding a powerful iron axe. He died holding the quiet, enduring, life-giving Word of God. His extraordinary life was a breathtaking historical testament to the profound reality that true lasting power is not found in aggressively dominating others. It is found in radical, fearless, and humble obedience to the ultimate call of Jesus Christ. As we reflect on this story, what kind of legacy are you actively building today? Will you settle for a safe, convenient, predictable religion that simply protects your own comfort zone? Or will you ask the living God for the supernatural courage to step out of the boat? Will you swing the axe of faith at the cultural idols, the financial worries, and the deep-seated fears in your life, and allow Him to build His magnificent sanctuary on the ruins of your own past failures? The life of Winfrith of Devon St. Boniface echoes the triumphant final words of the Apostle Paul in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7, "I have fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith." May God graciously grant each of us the exact same unyielding courage to finish our own course.